coming up on BCN today. The Lethbridge Airport gets the green light from Council for a $7.5 million renovation. Plus, the Alberta Court of Appeals declares the federal carbon tax unconstitutional. And opposition leader Rachel Notley attacks the Kenney government for Teck Resources pulling the plug on Alberta.
Your Canada. Your Southern Alberta. Your stories. From our studios in the heart of Lethbridge, it's BCN Today with Jeanette Roche.
Hello and thanks for joining us. Lethbridge police have charged 4 people with drug offenses following the execution of search warrants at 2 Northside homes. In January, members of the crime suppression team began an investigation into drug trafficking activities at 2 homes along the 1800 block of First Avenue North. On February 21st, the warrants were executed and 8 people were arrested. Police seized cocaine, methamphetamine, carfentanil, among other narcotics, as well as brass knuckles, pepper spray, and a taser gun. The Lethbridge Airport has received the all clear for renovations from City Council. Council voted yesterday to allow $7.5 million in upgrades, which would include adding restrooms to the current boarding areas, along with other expansions. Funding will also go towards improving the passenger experience and upgraded water service. Council also approved a transfer of provincial dollars for a women's transitional housing project aimed at supporting vulnerable women with recovery and aftercare. The $300,000 in provincial funding and $125,000 from the city will be allocated to help create a 20-bed facility through Streets Alive to provide safe, supportive, and affordable housing for women as they participate in the recovery program. The total cost for the project is $1.7 million. Council also voted Monday to discontinue funding for expansions to the Southern Alberta Art Gallery. SAG is one of 4 community projects that have been on the chopping block for the city's capital improvement project funding, but the first one to be officially removed. Council voted to defer the decision of the other 3 projects slated for funding cuts, including a new performing arts center by the Allied Arts Council, enhancements to the Nika Yuko Japanese Garden, and construction for a bike walkway path system through the city's Connections extension project. The city says it's considering the removal of these projects because it needs to cut back on spending, and there's been a lack of financial support from the province. In a 4-1 decision, the Alberta Court of Appeals became the first to declare that the federal carbon tax is unconstitutional. Last year, courts in Saskatchewan and Ontario ruled the carbon tax does obey the Constitution. The main reason behind the decision is that the carbon tax is an overstep by the federal government. In their decision, the justices said the division of powers remains key to our federal state. The federal and provincial governments are co-equals. The federal government is not the parent, and the provincial governments are not its children. About 300 supporters of the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs who oppose a pipeline across their traditional territories gathered at the BC legislature last night in defiance of a court injunction prohibiting similar actions. Victoria police officers were monitoring the supporters who at one point linked arms and blocked the progress of a police van arriving at the legislature. The injunction gives police authority to arrest people. Federal Conservative leader Andrew Scheer says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's inaction on rail blockades across Canada has given life to anti-energy protesters. Scheer says it's appropriate for the government to direct the RCMP to keep infrastructure projects clear and enforce injunctions.
There are many areas where there are protests that are under the jurisdiction of the RCMP, and I believe that having that leadership shown at the federal level would certainly send the signal that the Prime Minister is serious about what he's saying, but it's quite clear that he's not. In fact, he's sent the opposite signal. For days, he's been basically telling these illegal protesters that he's taking he's taking the use of police forces off the table. He's basically been giving them a signal that they can act with impunity. He's also talked about offering concessions to people who are breaking the law. And as we face developments in the future as it relates to other energy projects, these protesters will continue to be emboldened as they pursue their anti-free market, anti-energy development agenda. Nobody is talking about picking up the phone and telling the RCMP to arrest this person or that person, or to enforce the law this way or that way. But it is entirely appropriate and at this point very necessary that direction be given to, for example, keep critical infrastructure projects clear and to uphold court injunctions.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney plans to table a bill today that would create stiffer penalties for anyone who impairs critical economic infrastructure, including railways. Kenney says rail blockades set up to support the hereditary chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en First Nation have cost jobs and hurt the economy. And he believes they are partly to blame for Teck Resources' decision to shelve its massive Frontier mine project in Alberta.
Let me be clear. There is absolutely no doubt that this decision was taken in large part because of regulatory uncertainty and endless delays created by the national government, as well as the general atmosphere of lawlessness that we have seen take hold parts of our country and much of our economic infrastructure in the past 3 weeks. This should have been a straightforward and automatic approval.
Because of this decision, Jason Kenney said, quote, Canada has lost the opportunity for $70 billion in new tax and royalty revenue that could have funded social services over the next 4 decades. Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf also chimed in on Teck pulling the plug on the Frontier Oil Sands project. He joined Hal Roberts from Edmonton to discuss whether or not this decision will dissuade other energy companies from investing in future resource projects in Alberta.
It could definitely have that kind of impact. That's what makes it incredibly disappointing in light of lack of strong leadership from the Prime Minister's office right down through the federal. They have not addressed these issues well. They have not sent any signals that they are leading this country in a law-abiding, a law-following way. And the downstream outcome of some of these decisions by business because they don't trust the federal government are incredibly discouraging.
With the Frontier Oil Sands project now moving ahead, what will that mean for the Alberta economy?
Well, it means that we and the rest of the country are going to be missing out on potentially $70 billion worth of revenue over the next 50 years, unless there's something that we can do to move it forward. We just have to be even further resolved to make sure that our Canadian Energy Centre is making sure that the truth of these stories is getting out to Canadians and investors around the world, that we do have the most ethically produced resources and the most environmentally sensitive protections available anywhere in the world.
Right. That was Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf joining us from Edmonton. Teck Resources Limited cited one of its decisions for pulling out of Alberta as being a lack of a plan on combating climate change. Opposition NDP leader Rachel Notley says this is actually Jason Kenney's fault. Notley went on to say the UCP government fosters a partisan, polarizing debate on the environment that is scaring away protesters.
What we're hearing is that as long as Canada is fighting itself, is fighting internally, and as long as we pit sustainable, responsible economic development against meaningful strategies to combat climate change, all of us across this country will be left behind. Now, when we were in government, we were making significant progress on this issue, working together with key industry leaders. But even before his election, Jason Kenney has staked his political career on tearing all that down, sowing division, and undermining progress on combating climate change.
And there has been a lot of talk about how we as Canadians need to cut down our carbon footprint. Dr. Gregory Wrightstone is a geologist and author of the Amazon best-selling book, Inconvenient Facts. Dr. Wrightstone says CO2 is not necessarily as bad as governments make it out to be.
The average was an increase of 46% of biomass, the weight of crop growth. That's a good thing. That's not just a good thing, it's a really good thing. And because of increased CO2, we can feed the hungry. And around the world, people are benefiting from this.
Catch the full interview with Dr. Wrightstone discussing what he says are misconceptions about climate change coming up later on in our show. Western Canada's premier ag show is set to begin at Exhibition Park this Wednesday. The 2020 Ag Expo and North American Seed Fair will feature more than 350 indoor exhibitors. It will run Wednesday to Friday from 9 till 5 p.m. Visitors will get a chance to see the latest in farm equipment, livestock, supplies, chemicals, seeds, and information on livestock and crops. In a separate ticketed event, the Rotary Club of Lethbridge East will be hosting the Agricultural Scholarships Awards dinner, where two $10,000 scholarships will be announced. Canada has a new case of the novel coronavirus. It's in Toronto. Health officials say the woman in her early 20s was infected during a recent trip to China.
In that travel to China, we know that it did include some travel to Hubei province and to Wuhan in particular. When she arrived in Toronto, she was given instructions at the airport to contact Ontario's telehealth information line, which she did. And when she described her history of travel to the affected area, and she described her symptoms, which were resolving, she was referred then by the telehealth line to hospital.
U.S. health officials say the virus, which caused the COVID-19 illness, has infected more than 79,000 people globally and caused more than 2,600 deaths, and it's nearing a pandemic level.
Right now, clearly, there's a very serious situation in China, and you would say that there is a major epidemic in China. You use the word pandemic when you have a diffuse spread of these types of transmitted infections throughout the world. They have, the authorities, WHO and others, don't like to use the word pandemic, but by the classical definition, we're really teetering very, very close to that, because there are a number of countries outside of China that do have considerable number of cases, and there is community spread in those cases. So if you're not calling it a pandemic now, I think we're almost on the brink of it being considered by many people as a pandemic. We're seeing anecdotal cases that are being reported of people who are transmitting even when they're completely asymptomatic. I tend to believe them. I'm not sure the extent to which this is occurring, but I would not be surprised if it's occurring and occurring at a reasonable rate. But again, we don't have all the data to determine just what proportion of transmissions are actually coming from someone who's relatively asymptomatic or even completely asymptomatic.
Well, we had a fog advisory in effect earlier this morning and a chilly wind chill of -18. I'll tell you what the rest of the day will look like, though, and when we take a quick break, and I'll come back with the weather for you. Welcome back. Here's a look at our Tuesday weather highlights. Today we got some increasing cloud. We did have a chilly morning today with a fog advisory in effect. That has lifted a high of 5 degrees and a low overnight tonight of 0 degrees. And into tomorrow we're going to see a chance of flurries with a high of 6 degrees. Now looking ahead to the 5-day forecast, we're going to see some pretty good conditions here. We're going to get into the pluses and into the double digits. Look at that, 10 degrees expected for Thursday, lots of sunshine. We could even see it peak into the teens for Friday with a high of 13 degrees, and then into 9 degrees on Saturday, and then back to an even 5 degrees for Sunday and 8 degrees for Monday. Mainly sunny for those days as well, with some scattered clouds towards the end of the weekend and into next Monday. So the ALMANAC highs and lows for this time of year, 3 being the high, -9 being the low temperature. The highest temperature recorded on this day, though, was in 1992. It was 19 degrees, and the chilliest day was -33. That was back in 1994. The sun rose this morning at 7 6:23 a.m. and it will set at 6:05 p.m. I definitely can notice a difference when I'm driving to work now. I'm not driving in the dark anymore, which is great. So looking to the west coast today, scattered showers in Victoria and Vancouver with highs of 7 and 8 in those cities. -3 is the high today in Edmonton and 0 in Calgary, under sunny skies for most of Alberta today. Sunshine also expected today in Saskatoon with a high of -6. -4 expected to be the high in Regina with scattered clouds. A mix of sun and cloud also expected today in Winnipeg with a high of a -9. Now looking over further east, Toronto is going to see some precipitation today, or they're going to see some showers that are also turning into flurries, so kind of yucky conditions there with a high of 5. 4 degrees is expected to be the high today in Ottawa as well as Montreal today. Fredericton's high, 7 degrees. Same thing for Halifax. We've got some increasing cloud happening in Halifax. Lots of clouds actually as well in Charlottetown today with a high of 4 degrees there. St. John's, Newfoundland's going to be a nice even 6 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud there. There you go. That is your forecast. Just look at what's happening in your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Come for a night of down-home fun to the Friends Winter Barn Dance on Saturday, March 7th, beginning at 7 p.m. at the Galt Museum and Archives. Proceeds will go towards educational programs at the Galt. Tickets are $30 for adults, $20 for youth ages 11 to 17, and children 10 and under are free. Purchase yours by visiting galtmuseum.com. Southern Alberta Men's Ministry is hosting Shine Be the Light Men's Conference on March 20th and 21st at University Drive Alliance Church. Emceeing the conference is our very own BCN's Hal Roberts, with special guest speaker Pastor Leonard Anderson in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Tickets are $20 and $10 for college students. Purchase yours by visiting eventbrite.ca. For more information, call 403-327-4422. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Well, the season will be changing soon, and spring clothing is already hitting the shelves at retailers. Today's daily life hack will help you make some extra room in your closet. I definitely need this advice. Take a minute to turn all your hangers backwards. When you wear anything, turn it back. When it's time to go clothes shopping, you'll see everything that you don't actually wear. Unless you have a reason to save it, donate it. And there you go. That's been your daily life hack. The Critical Hazard Health and Safety hosted a public training session on CPR. As Micah Quinn explains, the goal is to teach workers more about how to help save a life.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Sometimes the difference between life and death can be mere seconds, and that's what Critical Hazard is training people for. Nick Schefter is the owner of Critical Hazard, and he teaches the emergency first aid program training.
We feel it's extremely important to train them for first aid for several reasons. Workplace requirements are definitely a big one. A lot of places now come with high hazard work, high risk jobs. Having somebody on your staff trained in first aid is definitely an asset.
Training consists of classroom work and then goes into hands-on training. Schefter teaches about what to do in a scenario where you have to administer CPR and then bring out an AED, which is an automated external defibrillator if someone's heart gives out.
One of the most important parts about the AED is it's a key element in the chain of survival. Having an AED on hand or receiving an AED quickly to defibrillate will greatly increase the chance of survival.
Schefter says the response to the training has been positive.
Reception is good. A lot of guys are taking it because it is a job requirement. Some guys are taking it because they do want to learn more.
Survival rates have doubled when a defibrillator has been used on a person having cardiac arrest. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Harvey Weinstein was taken from a New York City courthouse in an ambulance Monday after being convicted of rape and sexual assault. Weinstein accuser Ambra Battiliana Gutierrez, who says she was assaulted by the Hollywood producer in 2015, told reporters outside a Manhattan courthouse on Monday that her dream was fulfilled following the announcement of his guilty conviction.
I dreamed about this, like, in these last days twice. I don't know, I have people like saying it's guilty. in my dreams, and knowing that right now I'm here and this is reality and what is happening, it's just like something that my biggest dream would ever just even fulfill. Back in 2015, it wasn't handling the way that I was hoping for. I went to the police an hour after and I saw my life completely destroyed. And now I wanted just to feel that that moment was worth it, that all those years that I lost were worth it. It's about also all other people that would think they could do something like this. I feel that he's the example. He was the person that will give the example of not doing these things to others.
Members of the LGBTQ community in the United Kingdom have spoken about how hurt they were from comments made by evangelist Franklin Graham. The U.S. preacher is touring the UK this May. Following significant opposition from gay rights groups, 8 venues booked for his tour were canceled. Graham says not all reports are accurate about what he has claimed to say on certain issues, and that he was sorry to those who feel hurt.
Franklin Graham has vowed to press on with his upcoming tour of the UK starting in May this year, following unprecedented cancellations of all 8 city venues after opposition to his visit from a number of lobby groups, including the LGBT community. The US evangelist says the tour will go ahead and added they're taking legal action as this has now become a much wider issue.
We did have a contract signed with these venues, and they've breached the contract. I haven't broken any laws, and I'm not guilty of anything. So I think we just have to look at what our options are, and realizing that even though we can assign other venues, which we will do, I'm thinking of the church in the future. We need to do something to try to protect them.
Many Christian groups have also highlighted the fact that the freedom to declare the gospel is at stake in the UK at this time, including the Christian Institute.
Christians are right to be concerned when Franklin Graham or anyone else is prevented from sharing the gospel. What he has said is mainstream Orthodox Christianity. He said that marriage is between a man and a woman. He has said that there is no place for sex outside of that marriage relationship. These are mainstream Christian beliefs that a few activists are trying to shut down. So Christians are right to be concerned. They're right to raise those concerns to the venues involved.
According to many scientists around the world, the Earth is warming at an alarming rate with dire consequences. Coming up, Hal Roberts chats with a geologist who doesn't buy what the other scientists are selling. That's coming up right after this short break. Stay with us.